Welcome to another edition of Unplugged, coming off another victory on Monday night against the Crows. A timely one brought to you by originaluggboots.com.au, Australian-owned, Australian-made quality sheepskin Ugg boots. Great to have them on board and watch this space for our partnership with them. 12-6-78 to 8-7-55. So it's a 4-goal win over the bottom side in the competition that was winless. But as I introduce both of you, Aaron and Nick, it was one that meant a little bit. We spoke last week. Last week's loss was, I guess, so frustrating and so painful. And it's hard to know what hub life is going to look like for players over a long period of time. And I had like a lot of people, probably that feeling of dread that if you have a loss like that first up and then you get beaten by the bottom side in the comp, just how bad could things spiral out of that. And you could sort of tell in the group, Brett Ratton coaching from the bench, he was fist-pumping every time they kicked a goal. Tim Membry's reaction on the siren. We'd never won at the Adelaide Oval before. We'd only won one quarter at the venue against the Crows in history. We hadn't beaten them in nearly 10 years. It had a lot riding on it, and I must admit, for a 4-goal win over the bottom side, it meant a bit more to me than others probably would, Nick. But, it was a badly needed victory.
Yeah, it certainly meant something. And like you said, you could tell from the reaction of the boys at the siren how much it meant. It was one of those ones that, regardless of how the game played out, they just had to win. It didn't matter if it was by a point or 100 points. They just had to win. And there were times where, yes, especially in that second half, because we got off to a reasonably good start again. I think the first half was pretty decent. It was a bit scrappy, but we were playing okay. And then that third quarter, again, there were a few shaky moments where the Crows started to get their hands on the ball a bit more and drive it forward. And we were able to keep them off the scoreboard, which was nice. But there were a few moments I thought, geez, they're going to run over the top of us like the Dockers did the week before. And was a little concerned. And one of the best things, I think, was just to see that fight in the latter part of the third quarter. And then to kick the first couple of goals of the last quarter was very pleasing. To see that fight that we hadn't seen the week before and to see them stand up and really be counted. It wasn't pretty footy by any means, but like I said, we just had to win it by any means possible. And they did that and really stood up and showed that they've got a bit of grit in them, which I think we'd all been a bit concerned about, H.
Yeah. Basically, it's just getting the monkey off the back of the Adelaide Oval, considering the fact we've got to go back again this week. We do know that it's not impossible to win there now. We do know that, okay, now we can beat Adelaide. We haven't beaten Adelaide for a long time either. And just a flight back after a win is going to be a lot more of a happier group. I mean, flying from Adelaide to the Gold Coast after a loss, yeah, I couldn't imagine it'd be much of a fun flight to go back there. And then a 2.5 hour bus ride as well, or whatever it is, back to the Noosa. So just to keep ticking those wins over, keep the group happy, keep them, ticking over. And we go to Adelaide one more time. Then we're in Queensland for 4 weeks straight. So
we got 3 in a row at the Gabba, which obviously becomes something of a home ground for us. And 4 out of 5, I thought 3 in a row at the Gabba, or goes Gabba Sydney, Gabba or something. Sorry, Gabba Gold Coast, Gabba something like that. But 4 in a row in Queensland. And I think the timely thing too, when they got back to Noosa, was their quarantine period finished, which meant they had a little bit more freedom. I think they hit Hastings Street and had a few more trips to the beach, and we're just able to relax a little bit. And obviously this week's going to be largely about recovery. But yeah, I agree with that sentiment. In a game like that, where you just have to win, it's unlikely to be pretty. You're not just going to go out there and blow them away. It's probably going to be a little bit scrappy. We'd have to play a lot better than that to beat Port, but that's okay. It was just a case of ticking that box. And when Adelaide got within 9 points in the last quarter, I always felt through the game that it looked like we were probably going to win. But it was just only when Adelaide got within 9 points in the middle of the last quarter that it got a little bit tense. But it was good. We dominated the next 7 or 8 minutes and kicked 3 goals, 2-0, and put it to bed. The umpiring, probably on both sides of the coin, but probably especially ours, was horrendous.
We're not going to mention words of affirmation or...
No, but some bewildering. I mean, the Crows, it was poorly umpired in general. The Crows copped a few ordinary ones as well, but we certainly copped more. I mean, you could rattle them off. Dan Butler getting pinged deliberate for tripping over the ball, various other things. But anyway, that was just one of those things that added to the frustration of the night. But yeah, good win, and good that they now know they'll go back and be in the same rooms next week and this week and go through the same preparation, and we'll feel better about it. It's clearly been a hoodoo ground. We've had some shocking losses to Port Adelaide there in particular. So hopefully we can sort of rectify that reasonably quickly. Got a few injuries out of it, which we'll talk about selection-wise later, or one in particular. But the ruck situation, I know it's been a heavily asked about question by a number of people, but we chose Ryder and Marshall to double team O'Brien, and it worked effectively for us. But as we've discussed a little bit off air with the podcast, when Ryder and Marshall have rucked together, Ryder has been the most influential ruckman probably in the game across both sides. Marshall's done his job, but Ryder's been more influential. However, when Marshall has played on his own, he's generally dominated except the Fremantle game. So it is fascinating to know what we do. Port Adelaide have got Laddams with Lycett out of the side injured. Laddams was good last week for Port, but I don't mind the idea of us persisting with that type of setup, but it is an interesting debate.
Well, we basically have a player who probably would have played for him this week had he not come to us.
Correct.
So it's, we sort of taken a little bit away from them already before the game even starts, looking at it that way. He knows the ground. He knows the spaces. He knows he can sort of direct players and say, look, this is how this game might flow. This is where he knows how Port Adelaide kind of play as well. He'll be, okay, well, this player will be looking for this. Make sure you cover that. This player will be looking for this. Cover that. He's got some good insight that will really be able to help us in the middle
That's
there.
what Robbie Gray does at stoppages, that's for sure.
Well, as long as he doesn't tap to him this week, he'll be fine.
Yeah, well, that's right.
I mean, I think that both those guys have shown what we were concerned about when that trade was made. We know that Ryder is a better tap ruckman. We've always known that. And we've known that Marshall is more influential around the ground and up forward. This is nothing new to us. It's just kind of happening. It's playing out like we thought it might. And is one of the things that they kind of have to get right and kind of work out how to play together. Because you imagine, if it comes to finals time and we're there, then the ability to play two ruckmen at once it could be really important depending on matchups. So to get them some game time playing together is going to be important. But I think also important for Marshall as a young guy over this next kind of 4 or 5 weeks, where there really is a blockage of fixtures. You can't expect him to ruck one out for 4 games straight or 5 games straight in the space of 20 odd days. And so the ability for Ryder to really be able to give him a chop out in the ruck is going to be important for Marshall and to give him a bit of a rest, but also to physically to be able to take some of the pressure off him during those games when he's potentially coming up against bigger, stronger guys in contests. And Ryder really can, give him a bit of a buffer in those situations. I think the important thing is that we've got to utilise Marshall's strength around the ground. Ryder is clearly, as we've spoken about, clearly the better tap ruckman. And we saw on the weekend how influential he can be in those moments. And we've seen it a number of times through this season already. You look at our midfield group, and sometimes the ball lands in their lap, and they kind of look around going, "Shit, I've got the ball. I'm not used to that at a ruck contest." And it's kind of a surprise. And I think we kind of have to utilise that. It's a strength that we have. Not a lot of teams have a dominant tap ruckman, and he can be influential around the ground at times as well. He can snag a goal here and there. He can float back and take contested grabs and be a third man in defence. So he's a really good player in his own right. We just have to work out the best way to utilise them both at the same time, because both of them can be match winners. So it's going to be important to see how they go this week against a pretty decent unit.
I guess that's where it's also been handy bringing in the likes of Jones, Butler, and Hill, who have had decent ruckman to run under the feet of over the years as well. So they've basically they sort of know what's happening, and that's the sort of players we've seen who have basically taken our team the way we wanted to go, and it's starting to really click now.
Yeah, our centre bounce work has been pretty strong over the course of the season. I guess in rubber stamping the Adelaide game with our votes, which again were tricky. Some of them were in any case. I'll start off. I gave 3, like most people probably will, to Jack Steele, who'd be leading our best and fairest by the length of the Flemington Straight, I'd say, at the moment. Got difficult after there. I gave 2 votes to Dougal Howard. Obviously knows the ground very well. Played his best game, I thought. It was nice and fired up. Sort of reminded me a bit of Goddard when he used to play behind the footy, directing traffic and sometimes admonishing teammates for their errors and things like that. Kicked a sensational goal in the second quarter. That was terrific. And the 1 vote could have gone any number of ways. I could have given it to Butler, could have given it to Jones, could have given it to Gresham, could have given it to Ryder, but I went with a young player that's been really improving over the course of the year, and I gave it to Nick Caulfield, who's been tracking nicely. So 3 Steele, 2 Howard, 1 Caulfield. Hey?
Steele, clear 3 votes. I mean, it's, as you're saying, we should be able to give him 5, and then the next one will be 2. So that's sort of how far ahead he is at the minute. Go 2 to Gresham, just getting the ball out of the middle, winning the first usage of it. I mean, not every ball is hitting a target, but our players will get better. They'll know this is where the ball lands when he kicks it out of the centre clearance quickly. We'll start getting to those positions. We'll start winning more out of the centre and get that clean first use. It's just going to keep going and going and going, and he's doing basically the job he's out there to do at the moment. And 1 vote to Angry Doogs. I love the Angry Dougal. That was the bit of passion he showed was fantastic. That game, if he can bring us that most weeks, we've got a nice pick up there.
Yeah, again, I've gone Steele 3. I think it's pretty obvious that he was our best player, and he probably is our best player. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with him in a leadership capacity. You can't imagine that Geary has too many years left in the role, and I think a lot of us would have thought that Steele was kind of a natural successor in a leadership role, but he was overlooked for the leadership group this season, which was a surprise. So that's an interesting one to keep an eye on, because he plays like a captain. You look at other clubs that have gun midfield captains, and you look at Selwood and Hodge and Mitchell at Hawthorn over the years, and those type of guys. Trevor spoke, and Steele is up there in terms of the way that he carries our midfield group at the moment. Kicked a great goal of his own as well, and he kind of does everything and really leads from the front. So it's clear 3 votes for me. 2 I gave to Jade Gresham. Like you said, he's not going to hit a target all the time, and at the moment he's probably missing more targets than he's hitting, but the way that he attacks the ball and attacks the contest in the middle, what do you have? I think he had 7 clearances and 18 disposals. 16 of them were kicks, and you'd imagine a lot of them were contested. Just keeps banging the ball forward, keeps hitting the contest, and extracts the ball when the heat is on, and has played a really important role. And he'll get better, like you said, he'll get better. His disposal will get better as he gets more used to playing that role. This is still a new role to him, as we said last week. And I've been really impressed with his composure and his ability to keep getting to the ball in those moments. And the other one was Zach Jones. I thought he, again, attacked the ball really well. He keeps pumping the ball forward. Probably goes against the grain. I think a lot of people had Howard and Caulfield specifically in their votes, but I thought he was really important when the heat was on, that he kept a cool head. Kept bringing the ball forward, kept extracting. I think he also had 6 clearances, 20 touches. He was really important for us. And just the ability for him to keep cool and calm and collected is something that we didn't really see from him at Sydney in previous years. And it was one of the things, we spoke about pre-season and around the trade period, that he was kind of known for his ability to get the ball and to be tough and bring some pace and speed to the group. But his disposal was a question mark on his career to date, but he's been really good in that regard for us so far. And like I said, the ability for him to keep calm and cool and collected when he has the ball has been really important in our ability to move the ball forward and get it to guys like Max King, who was also impressive. And on another day could have been in the votes with his ability to keep presenting and keep hitting the contest. Marked the ball really strongly, kicked a beauty from 50 odd, and just his development is going to be crucial.
Certainly is. We've got a lot to talk about a bit later on in regards to what the fixture looks like for the next 4 weeks. As we said, Queensland bound Queensland home after the Port Adelaide game. Obviously, the AFL heeding some warning signs and moving most games out of New South Wales, so sort of impending what might happen there going forward. Sydney and GWS playing in Perth, for example, is a reasonable pointer for that going forward. We'll also have a chat about, or have feedback from some of our listeners, and get some of those questions for you as well. But just before we're joined by our next special guest, a message from one of our new partners. Good to have them on board. Now, some UGG boot companies import their products. Some even have Australia in their name and are made offshore, and some aren't even sheepskin. Original UGG Boots is different. Original UGG Boots have over 30 years experience manufacturing sheepskin UGG boots in Australia, always with a focus on quality first, and we all know you can't beat Australian-made quality, so support Aussie at originaluggboots.com.au for all your UGG Boots needs, from slipper to moccasins, loafers to lace-ups. Original UGG Boots have you covered. Customised or monogrammed boots also available at that website again, originaluggboots.com.au. Original UGG Boots, Aussie owned, Aussie made, right here in Melbourne. And now more than ever, obviously, you've got to support things that are made here locally in Victoria, as we do it pretty tough over the next little while. But we're now going to be joined by a former captain of the Saints.
From inside 50, this time he sprays it across the face. Still in play, ball, chance, he snapped it, he goes! So Luke Ball puts the Saints up by 7 points. And Rob, you just get the Saints in the last 5 or 6.
Well, our next special guest on the program played 142 games for the Saints, played an additional 81 with Collingwood, was the best and fairest winner with St Kilda in 2005, runner-up the previous year in 2004, captained the club as well in 2006 and 2007. He was a premiership player, unfortunately in the wrong jumper, but he did get there in 2010. Luke Ball, thanks for joining us on our podcast this week.
Thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, when it all started for you, obviously you were part of the now dubbed Superdraft, and with good reason, selected pick 2 after Luke Hodge in that 2001 draft. Can you take us through to that period? Were you always linked to St Kilda? Were you did you have contact with Hawthorn or other clubs sort of later in the draft? And obviously when you arrived at the Saints, that first year you spent obviously doing your schooling and didn't play in 2002 and had a few injury concerns. So can you take us through, I guess, your arrival at the club and how that all came about?
Well, I was a mad Hawk supporter growing up. Had a couple of uncles that played through the 80s when they were pretty successful, obviously, and into the 90s. And, so there was always, there was a faint chance there that with Hawthorn having the first pick that I might end up there. And I suppose the romantic part of you would have seen the good part of that. But I remember getting a phone call the night before the draft from Tomo, obviously coach at the time, saying that they'd be calling my name out at pick 2. So both my parents breathed a big sigh of relief because the picks after 2 were, I think, West Coast at 3 and then Fremantle at 4. And we'd spoken to both those clubs at the time, and you're right. I was still completing year 11, or just completed year 11, so had year 12 to look forward to the year after. And Mum and Dad were pretty keen for me to finish my schooling at the school that I'd done. They'd been at for the previous 6 or so years. So the thought of having to go into state at that time, they weren't crash hot on. At the time, I would have been happy to go, of course. You put your name in the draft and you can end up anywhere. So, but as it was, actually got the first call from Hawthorn, I think, from John Turnbull, who was the recruiting manager at Hawthorn, saying that they were going to go with Hodgie. And then not long after, got a call from Tomo and Johnny Beveridge saying that they'd be calling me out of pick 2. So, not sure I slept a heap the night before the draft anyway, but at least going to the draft, I was reasonably assured of where I was going to end up.
Now, you talk about speaking to the clubs and getting phone calls from the clubs and that sort of thing. But what about between yourself and Juddy and Hodgie and them? Did you talk much between yourselves thinking, yeah, okay, we're going to end up here, I'm going to end up here, that sort of thing?
Probably towards the end there probably the couple of weeks leading into the draft. And back then, so what are we talking, almost 20 years ago, there certainly wasn't the focus on the draft that there is now. It was probably only just starting around then. In terms of, the odd article in the paper and all that sort of stuff. And towards the draft, when probably all the talk was around the three of us, and there were a couple of articles, we started to think about it. But I guess you got a fair bit of other stuff going on as well. I mean, I think Juddy would have been in year 12. I was doing year 11 exams, so you got a bit to focus on, and you're trying to focus on that as much as possible until your name's actually called out, because you can't do much other than prepare yourself physically as well. So, there was a bit of banter. And I'd known Hodgie from, I played in an under-12 team with him, even though he was a Colac boy. I played in an under-12 rep team with him, played cricket against him, so I knew him reasonably well. Juddy was a year above. Back then you could be drafted as a 17-year-old. So, but played at Sandringham Dragons and played school footy against him. So I knew those guys and a handful of others, just by playing rep teams along the way with them reasonably well. So whenever you bumped into them, you had a good chat, obviously. But there wasn't a heap of, I suppose, speculation heading into that, from our point of view anyway, heading into that day.
Obviously, the Superdraft named that for good reason, and the careers that all three of you had probably helped kind of cement the type of media around the draft that has turned into these days. But between the three of you, was there much banter, through your careers and at the end of them, based on how each of you performed?
There wasn't. No, I mean, clearly, the two guys either side of me. And I say this without any sort of false modesty. Those two guys are Hall of Famers. They've had some of the most decorated careers of all time. So I must admit, when they talk about the Superdraft and the 2001 draft, and my name just dags onto the end of a few of the others, I'm happy to cop that and to accept that. But I was more, I think early days, I think you're probably right. I think early days, and I reckon we're seeing it with young guys now, there is a bit of that competitive rivalry that you don't want to get left behind. And I had a bit of a wait to get going. I think both those guys and a handful of others as well, including some of the guys that I got drafted with at the Saints, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Got going pretty early on, and I had to sit back and watch a bit, and that was reasonably tough because you didn't want to get left behind, and you wanted to prove that you were as capable as them. And then as your career goes on, I think you sit back and appreciate those guys as players as well, like the general footy public do. And as I said, those two in particular will go down as all-time greats. So I very much enjoy watching them. And Jimmy Bartell was in that draft. Gary Ablett Jr., who's still playing. He's the last one standing, I think. It was taken father-son in that draft as well. So as I said, when the draft's spoken about in those terms, and if I can just sneak even half a mention somewhere towards the end, I'm okay with that.
So Grant Thomas was very big in that era on obviously creating that family environment, I think, at the club and bringing you all together. But if you look at our draft haul over that period, so the year before you is Rewald and Kazitsky. In your year, it's Xavier Clark, Nick Dalsano, Lee Montagna, Matt Maguire. A year later is Brendan Goddard, and I think Sam Fisher potentially around about that time as well. So obviously all stars of the game and of the club that would sort of come through together. How important or significant was that in the group? You're all the same age. You've all come through together. You actually grew effectively from the same age through the system and made us successful pretty quickly in 2004.
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously it came about, or a circumstance of or the back of a reasonably poor era for the club in terms of results, which allows you to have access to those early picks. And it's one thing to have access to them, and obviously you've got to get them right. And I guess we were the beneficiaries of that. And yeah, all those guys you mentioned, it was fantastic to enter the club with all those guys at a period. And I think we all, though, absolutely benefited from some of the experience that was there. The champions of the club that were still there when we walked in. Some of the greatest names of the club, Lowe, Burke, Harvey, Hamill, Gehrig, Andrew Thompson, Justin Peckett, Ozzie Jones, Stevie Powell, and a handful of others. We were lucky that we came into the club, as I said, off the back of a lean period, but walked into a place with fantastic role models. And whilst we spent a lot of time together as young guys and formed a really strong group within a group. From that point of view, we were very much the beneficiaries of those fantastic guys leading by example. So, it only took a couple of years for I guess the old that were there and this young group coming through, whose standards had to pretty quickly meet those of the older players. It didn't take too long for the results to start to turn and for us to start to win some games of footy.
So yeah, thinking of winning and that sort of thing. So 2003, basically first year you're playing games, and we start towards the end of 2003 really picking up wins, getting finished the season off quite well. Just missed out in finals really. Having a look at towards the end of 2003, do you think we could, the way that we finished that, move into 2004 and just start the way that the club did? It was 10 straight and made it all the way into the finals and basically missed out in the grand final by a kick.
Yeah, I think we did. I mean, the younger group were pretty confident in our ability and our ability to push ourselves to improve over that time. And it was led by Tomo. And through that time, we went on some fantastic camps. Before training camps were training camps in a sense. Tomo doesn't get much credit probably for pioneering those in a sense. But we had a great end of 2003, went on a fantastic training camp to London for 3 weeks. I think it was at the time. As a 19, 20-year-old, you couldn't ask for much more, and we'd had access to some unbelievable world-class facilities and athletes, and in a sense we were pretty spoiled from a young age because that became the expectation from that point on. But he set a pretty high bar, Tomo, and in a sense that camp was a bit of a match that was lit under the group, and as I said, it probably came at a right time in terms of the senior core still playing really, really strong footy and demanding really high standards of the younger group, and then some pretty sharp development from even across that pre-season from 03 to 04 from all those guys that you mentioned earlier. As well as adding a few in the draft. So, you never expect to probably win, to jump out of the blocks like we did and win 10 in a row as easily as we did. But, we started to get going really strongly. And along with that, you really enjoy what you're doing then when you're playing that well as a team and your standards are high and everyone knows what's expected of them. And, I'm sure we'll talk about what happened towards the end of the year. And at the end of the day, what we were a kick away from playing a grand final, and the other thing that was obviously a really strong era of competition as well. I mean, that was Brisbane coming off their dynasty, and Port Adelaide at that stage, I think it finished on top of the ladder for 2 of those years, and had fallen short in the final. So. We came up against them over on their home patch in a prelim final, were dominant early, of course, and in the end, it was one of those games that could go either way, and not one that I think about too much. The losing prelims and losing finals, you don't tend to think about too much, but you tend to sort of push those down towards the very, very back of your memory. But you look, I suppose, when you do reflect on them, they are missed opportunities now.
You talk about the group and the young guys especially being really confident and kind of full of exuberance and that sort of stuff. After that first half of that season and the type of footy that you guys were playing under Tomo, how confident were you guys heading into that final series?
We were. We were certainly confident and we'd shown that our best footy against all the teams throughout the year stacked up really well. We had that fantastic game against Brisbane under the roof at Etihad where we proved that we could mix it with the big boys, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And so we were confident that that we'd earned our spot in that top four, and that we were that we were in good shape to have a fair crack at it. I guess what we learned though in that first final was that finals footy is a different kettle of fish, and I do have a pretty clear memory of that night, and that being a real shock to the system, and almost literally for me, I remember getting a whack in the face. I remember lining up against Simon Black. This is 2004, the first final up in Brisbane there. And I remember lining up on Simon Black in the first bounce, and the ball came down and his arm flew back, and it was an accident, but just whacked me right in the eye, and I couldn't see for about 90 seconds, and that set the tone for the night. Unfortunately, what were we, 80 points down at half time or something? It was a disaster, but I think in the end it was. You never want to get thumped in a final like that, but it was probably not a bad thing, especially for the younger guys in the group. Say, okay, that home and away footy is one thing, but you got to raise your level when the whips are cracking at the end of the year.
How was the health of the group 12 months later? Obviously, you had a terrific period there, 04, runner-up in the BNF, then winning it in 05. But I think a lot of Saints fans look at 05 perhaps as a bigger missed opportunity. Obviously, they went to Adelaide and won the first final so impressively, had the week off. Sydney had that gruelling run through, and I think we were 15 points up just before three-quarter time in the prelim against Sydney. But we had a lot of injuries. How was the health of the group? Could you see that coming, I guess, what happened in that last quarter?
I think looking back now, you never want to make excuses, but I think that was, I remember or the second last home and away game against Freo over there where we lost after the siren. Longmuir kicked that goal, and we were dropping like flies. I think Luke Penny hurt himself, Goose might have hurt himself, Maxie Hudson on top of Aaron Hamill was injured, I think, and in a sense we really did limp into that final series. Even having been one of the best teams throughout the year, you do need a bit of luck towards the end of the year with injury and those sort of things. So to go to Adelaide in that first final, and essentially halves played him by himself in that first half, and then a few of us decided to jump on his back, and that was one of the best wins I've ever been a part of. Was amazing, but it possibly covered up a little bit the fact that we were just going physically, and I reckon I was starting to struggle with my groins a bit towards the end of that year as well. I was just hanging on, and we made it to three-quarter time even in the prelim, and just didn't quite have the gas to match it with the Swans, and credit to them, they had a full head of steam as well. They just got over the Cats, hadn't they, the week before, and they got themselves on a roll in that last quarter, and we couldn't stop it. So again, don't like thinking about it too much, because it really is anytime you lose a prelim. And that year, I think we'd certainly proved ourselves as one of the better teams in the comp, but weren't good enough and weren't fit enough when it mattered.
05, you won the best and fairest. You shared it with another hard nut, number 10 in Stevie Baker. Now, I texted Bakes just before we jumped on this call to ask if you had any funny stories or anything to tell us about you that we could ask about. And he wrote back one line that was just, "Nah, mate, he was a nerd." Have you got anything about Bakes that you can tell us?
Oh, how long have we got?
We've got as long as you've got.
Bakes. He's a nerd. He's a classic. I saw him. When was it? Oh, it was the start of the year. No, when was Lenny's beer? At the start of the year, we snuck up to Sydney to surprise Lenny for his 40th birthday. And Bakes had been on the Gold Coast, and Troy Schwartz and Milne had organised it. It was going to be a surprise, so they teed it up with his brother-in-law to pick Lenny up in the morning. Come up with some sort of plan, low-key plan, and take him to the other side of town just to have lunch, just for the two of them, before Tara, his wife, was going to pick him up and I think take him out for dinner and stay in the city or something like that. Anyway, so we're all in on it, and yep, we fly up that morning and we meet at the Watsons Bay Hotel. We all check in, and then quickly get changed, get ourselves into a taxi to get to the pub that we were having lunch at. Bakes is coming from the Gold Coast, so he's going to meet us there. So we're in contact with him. His flight gets delayed, so he was supposed to arrive before us. He gets there, so we're all at the hotel waiting. Waiting. Where's Bakes? Where's Bakes? Everyone's here except him. Next thing, he arrives and he's gone all red, and he's. Boys, I think I've stuffed it. I think I've ruined the surprise. He's arrived at the Watsons Bay Hotel just as Lenny and his brother have pulled in to drop their bags off to stay at. So he hasn't seen him for ages. They literally walk in to the reception together. Lenny sees Bakes. Bakes sees Lenny. He tries to hide, but he completely blows the cover. And the whole weekend was, the whole plan was ruined. And that pretty well sums up Bakes in a story. But no, he was one of the funniest teammates, and one of the best teammates, one of the most reliable blokes, and just a bloke you just love to play with. He was so tough. I mean, that team of the early 2000s. I was talking about it with I think Goose the other day. The amount of hard nuts, the amount of guys that would just physically sacrifice their body for the team was extraordinary. When you think about Baker and Rewald, Kajitsky, Steve Lawrence, Powell, Thompson, Maguire, Brett Voss. It was one of those, Hamill. It really was a high standard to set. And for us young guys, if you didn't, we used to say, if you didn't take your turn for the team, then you'd get found out pretty quick in that scene. So Bakes was the epitome of that, and it was a huge honour to be able to share the best and fairest with him in 2005.
Off the back of that, what does it mean to you to now forever be a St Kilda best and fairest winner, to be a Trevor Barker medalist, and especially of that team?
I mean, you genuinely don't play or covet individual awards, but that is something that I look back on with great pride. Absolutely, especially with the fact that it's named the Trevor Barker Award as well, and you hear about the regard that and the esteem that he's held in at the club and in the broader AFL community. So that's something that I absolutely treasure and look back on with great pride.
Now, and then on the back of that, 2006, you actually get named as captain under the GT rotation policy. And yeah, I mean, so how did that come about? Did the best and fairest have any sort of bearing of effect on it? Did GT basically pull you aside and say, it's your job, or do you want it, or how did it all go getting the job?
Yeah, it obviously started a few years earlier, and Tomo, that was one of his real strong suits, I think. He's management of people, and he'd had some corporate experience obviously before he started coaching, and again, I think he was probably the first to really introduce leadership groups. And I remember him talking to me about it in 2004 when I was only 20 odd, just about even going through the process of nominating yourself, and that's how we used to do it back then. If you wanted to be a part of it, you put your hand up and got up in front of the group and explained why you wanted to represent the group. And even going through that process, as I look back now as a 20, 21-year-old, is a good one, is a development exercise, because it's not necessarily comfortable. You don't get up and talk about yourself. It's something that it takes practice, and it's not a naturally comfortable thing. So that it started a few years earlier, and was against the trend a bit. And I remember him coming to me and suggesting that this is what he thought would be of benefit to me in the long run. And looking back now, I was 21, turning 22, so still really young and not ready for it really, but and I struggled at certain times throughout the year with it. When you think about some of the senior players that were still running around for the club, to think that I was running out or leading them out and tossing the coin, at times it didn't really sit that comfortable with me. But I look back now and see the method to his madness a bit, and take some strong lessons from that season. And what made it even more challenging was that I wasn't going that well physically on the field either. So the natural thing when you're not playing as well as you would have liked is to revert back to thinking about yourself and how can I only get myself back. But I remember talking throughout the year, part of the challenge of being a leader is to constantly be thinking about others and how you can help your teammates and the team, not just how you're going. So that was, at a very general level, that was one of the lessons that I learnt that year.
I guess a two-part question to the last one from me. Obviously, you struggled with the body a little bit over that period. I mean, you were captain under Grant Thomas in 2006, and then when he departed the club, you were, I think, co-captain in 2007 under Ross. We know, obviously, it's been spoken about a lot, but you worked through St Kilda's next really legitimate shot at it in 2009, which was clearly a horrible day for a lot of people. You were contributing well that day, and we know it was much spoken about the limited game time in the last term. Can you sort of take us through, I guess, the sequence of events that saw that be your last game at the club, and I guess how your relationship is with Ross now, all these years down the track?
Yeah, I'll work back. Me and Ross are fine. He's back now. He's living not far away. I still see him a fair bit. I live around the corner from Rui. I see a lot of Rui, and bump into Ross a fair bit. And I always said I had great respect for him as a person and a coach. It didn't end up how I would have liked at the club, obviously. But and the other thing, it's been 10 or 11 years now, so we're fine. We've got a relationship, no problems there, and likewise with a lot of the players. And I'm really grateful for that, because it was a really tough time and ultimately a really tough decision. I mean, I think most players would love to end up being a one club player and 300 game player and all that sort of stuff. And I was certainly no different, and had 8 fantastic years at the club. Had some fantastic mates and loved the club, loved the supporters. In the end, it was a decision that was made with my head and not my heart in terms of my footy. And I was at a pretty low point in my footy life and footy career, and was probably convinced in the end. Needed to be convinced because as you said, we got so close as a group, and we hadn't got what we wanted. So it was I needed some convincing that in order to revive a spluttering footy career, I needed a fresh start. So without getting into too much detail about it, that was sort of where it ended up. In the end, and I think he's spoken about it as well. The way the team was going, and that year in particular, it was such an amazing year, 2009, and no injuries, and some players had come into the team who were playing really strong roles. Clint Jones and Minnie McCall and these sort of guys, and the squeeze was on, and I got squeezed out, and I think in the end it just did look like that the club was heading in a different direction, and that's not unusual. I think now we see it a fair bit, so I don't have any qualms with that, albeit that it was the hardest decision that I'd had to make to that point in my life, and but I can 11 years on now, and a fair bit of water under the bridge. You get on with life. You have to. You can't get caught looking back too much, because I heard the sports psych at Essendon say if you look too far back, or if you're constantly living in the past, you're prone to depression. If you're looking too far ahead, you're prone to anxiety. So you've got to sort of try and live in the moment a fair bit. So that's a bit of a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully captured broadly what happened through that period.
I guess just one more on the topic, without harping on too much about it, because we don't often hear about the human perspective of player movement in the competition. You always hear about the impact on a club, and obviously there was a lot written about yourself and Ross. But how much of an impact does you leaving the club have on your mates? I mean, obviously you mentioned you're still mates with a lot of the boys now, and you still have a really strong relationship with a lot of them. But especially having to come up against them the following year on grand final days, what impact did that have on some of those relationships for a period?
Yeah, definitely strain them. Clearly, yeah. You go from seeing them every day in the locker room, and being really close to moving on with a new group and becoming an opposition player. So there's no doubt that there's a bit of a strain on them for that initial period. And it's actually, I remember, really early on. So I'd only just moved, and I was still sort of still hanging on to the past a little bit. And I remember, a few people saying to me, "Mate, the decision's made. There's no point in again looking back. You've got to go full steam ahead. Otherwise, it won't work there either, and it'll just fizzle out." So, that's for the first few years there, you do sort of you do drift a little bit, but as I said, I'm really, really wrapped now and pleased now that that I'm I see a fair bit of those guys that I got drafted with and play a lot of footy with, and we've all got kids now, so we're all similar age. So it's great to see the next generation running around and playing together. So, and we reminisce every now and then, but we don't talk about footy that much either, because there's so much else going on. So from that point of view, it was tough, but it's been great that the times sort of worked through all that. And the other part was that not only on mates and stuff, but your family. That was the thing that surprised me at the time, that how you probably took it for granted a bit, but how invested your parents and your family are in you and what you're doing in your career. And it was the most upset I've ever seen my parents when going through all that period, and when I finally sort of made the decision to move on. That really struck me as well. That I'd never seen them, and we've been so fortunate. my life, but I'd never seen them so emotionally affected by anything. So that sort of struck me through that period as well.
Now, you mentioned seeing the players in the locker room and all that all the time. Now, you're pretty much at Moorabbin in what I guess we could call the dying years there before they headed down to Seaford.
Yeah.
Have you seen the new facilities much, or look at them and just sort of think, mate, I wish we had that when we were down there, and compare it to what you were using at that point, and just look at it. Wow,
you know what?
Comforts they've got now.
Yeah, I have been lucky enough to have been shown through them, and they're fantastic. They're amazing. Actually, I'm not too far away. I drove the girls. We were driving past. I had the girls in the car, and I thought driving past Linton Street, and I just pulled in. The other week, there was obviously no one there because the players were all away. But I just quickly jumped out of the car and showed the girls who were 5 and nearly 4. This is where Dad used to work with Nick, who they know, and Uncle Goose, years ago. So they're fantastic facilities. But it's funny, you do and you don't. Like and again, we didn't know any different back then, but. We had a footy oval with good grass. We were doing weights on the dance floor of the old disco that Trevor Barker used to dominate. Apparently, we had a sauna. That they dusted off and dug back out for us. That Fraser Gehrig used to sit in the corner of and hold court. And we didn't have much else, but. We didn't need much else back then, and there was sort of a charm to the old Moorabbin that time goes on that you need to keep up with the competition and improve your facilities. But part of me, and that's one thing that we do reminisce about is the facilities that we used to enjoy in those early years at Moorabbin. We didn't want for much else. It was great.
Paulie, thank you very much for joining us today. I think it's safe to suggest there's a fair bit of red and white and black that never left you. So thanks for giving us a fair chunk of your time tonight, and good luck with everything going forward. And thanks for all you did for the club when you were there.
No worries. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks.
The week we had leading up was fantastic from an educational point of view. We put some things in place and we still didn't get it right, but we took some real big steps forward as a group. To all the Victorian Saints supporters there, I know you guys are doing it hard at home and pretty tough, so hopefully that gave you a smile tonight, and you're pretty proud of the boys because some of the efforts were outstanding. I thought Ryder in the ruck, Howard down back, and then Steele around the ball, and Gresham, Jones, they were very busy and lively, and Butler's played great footy. So a good step forward. In 5 days we'll be back here, so we'll head back tomorrow morning pretty early, back up to Noosa, get our boys right, and then go again. But we want to make sure that we stay in front of the ledger, and 4-3, great result. So to everyone, please take care. I know back in Victoria it's pretty tough at the moment, but the chanting from the Saints supporters here tonight was brilliant, and we loved it. So go Saints.
We look ahead to Port Adelaide, who are the number 1 seed in the competition at the moment, sitting on top of the ladder. Their only loss was a belting at the hands of Brisbane, but they've had some really impressive wins. Thumped West Coast, beat GWS pretty handily. But we did see when they played Carlton at the Gabba on Sunday that they are gettable. The Blues had that game just about in their keeping. They led by 7 points with about 6 minutes to go and just fell away over that last period. Port Adelaide missed several chances to beat them, and then obviously nailed it with a ripping goal right at the end from Robbie Gray, just to haunt us a little bit, seeing him do that again, although it is nice to know that it can happen to somebody else. But so they're a good side, Port, but in saying that, they aren't entirely infallible. If you look at their record, they can at times be vulnerable when enough pressure is applied, and they can be exposed in that regard. Obviously, they're back at home in front of their fans. They will have to make at least one change, with Josh Battle going out of the side for at least a week. Dan Hannebery, as we said last week, was actually pretty close to playing. As to whether they pull the trigger on him now or wait until we play in our hub state of Queensland remains to be seen. But what are we thinking selection-wise? Battle out. So whether they go with another versatile type player that can play a couple of different roles in that team, or whether they go with somebody like Webster or Robertson that might play purely back. And then the other question might be on a Ryan Burns or the two ruckmen as to whether we persist with either of those options.
Well, it's going to be a question of whether do we want to swing the changes a little bit this week or wait until the first week we get back. I wouldn't be changing too much from last week, basically as little as possible, because the players who went last week know the ground. They've played there more recently than what Port Adelaide players actually have. So that's something to try and take advantage of. Because they've been in Queensland for a month now, so they're only just going to get home, get there the same time we get there. There's no big advantage as there usually is, it seems. But yeah, I mean, battle out. I'm trying to think who could possibly come in. I don't know if we go big again, or do we go a smaller player? I mean, they're a reasonably quick team, so we might want to go a little bit smaller, bring in some run. I'm assuming Hanbury may be available. It's a tough one. Our backline functioned without Battle. I mean, he was out quite early, so I really not 100% sure which way they're really going to go. But I would not be changing anything that doesn't need to be changed. That's pretty much as simple as I'd be going.
Right.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I wouldn't be changing much unless you really had to, and hopefully there aren't any more issues to be too concerned about. Obviously, Battle's the one. The two that I'd be looking at would be Robertson. If they feel like the backline needs bolstering, then Robertson's probably the one. He's really versatile and flexible in the way that you can utilise him. One of the things that I think we have missed has been a bit of speed out of halfback, and so Webster could be one to come in that regard. We've seen Clark and Caulfield play that halfback role fairly well, but they're both very composed guys. That they seem to move slowly. They remind me a little bit of guys like Nick Del Santo and Luke Hodge off halfback, that they're not especially quick, but they read the play really well. They've been really good in terms of intercept marking and getting the contest in terms of third man or loose man in defence. But if we wanted to bring in some urgency into that back line, then Webster's probably the one to look at. The other one that I think could be an interesting one is Jack Bytel. I think he's been on the cusp for a few weeks, and obviously brought in Ryan Burns last week. He didn't do a lot and seemed at times a little overawed by the occasion, but he did in other moments kind of show that he was ready for it. And he's got a bit of pace. He's got some size about him. Didn't look like he was scared of the contest or of the opposition. And so I'd be keeping him in. I think it can be really tough to bring in a young kid for the first game and then drop them straight away if they have a quiet one. So I'd be keeping him in if possible, and bringing someone like a Bytel in just to give them another shot of kind of youth and exuberance and the excitement. I think everyone seemed to enjoy the fact that they had a debutant last week, and they all got around in pre-game, and you could tell that there was some excitement about it, and be keen to see them do it again. I think he's another big-bodied mid that we could use, would give them an excuse not to have to fly Hanbury over for another week and kind of keep him in Queensland, mean that he doesn't have to get on a plane, doesn't have to sit on a 2-hour bus trip, doesn't have to go through all of that in terms of a return from injury. And we know how susceptible he's been in the past. So, if possible, I'd be looking at keeping him in Queensland and bringing someone like a Bytel or a Webster or a Robertson in and keep Hanbury fresh and fit for the upcoming traffic jam.
Obviously, Dixon and Gray in front of the ball have been huge for Port Adelaide, so getting those matchups right in terms of Robbie Gray, be it with, I know Geary spent a lot of time forward, but whether he reverts to that, whether you throw a challenge to one of those sort of like a Wilkie or something like that to play on a more mobile, smaller player, which he's been able to do, whether it's Howard or Carlisle or the like that get that first dibs on Charlie Dixon. Obviously in the ruck, we might be able to get an advantage. Stephen Motlop and Brian Burton are set to miss for Port after getting hurt last week, and Connor Rosie is under a bit of a cloud. By the time you listen to this podcast, he may or may not have been selected. So that would obviously be handy. But, yeah, they're gettable. We obviously have to play better, and overcoming the Adelaide Hoodoo is one thing. We haven't beaten Port since 2011. We probably should have beaten them 6 times since then, but we haven't done so on any of those occasions. So Adelaide had a hoodoo over us where they were just flogging us every time we played them, whereas Port Adelaide beat us by a kick or 12 points, or they come from behind and beat us by 8 points or whatever. So we generally get a good look at them. It's not a bad matchup. They flogged us last year in China, but half our list had food poisoning and the other half had gastro, I think. So that was a struggle. So, yeah, it's a gettable game. Obviously, we do need to lift, but big chance to a free hit to go 5-3 effectively, which would be massive for us. And the fixture going forward, so after that we play Sydney at the Gabba in 4 games in 16 days. Sydney at the Gabba, then the Gold Coast at Metricon, which is a good old-fashioned away game, and then both Geelong and Essendon at the Gabba. So 3 games at the Gabba. We would expect to beat Sydney, which is another hoodoo now that we're talking about it. And if we could break through that, then it obviously puts us in a good position. But first step is Port Adelaide this week. And a few of our listener questions in relation to some of that. We've addressed both Benji and Sharon James, also asking about the Marshall-Ryder combination. One for you, Wayne Dragwich says, who's directing the forward line in Ruffy's absence? How much do you think his influence is missed on the bench? Possibly he's the one who gives a spray to the mids for bombing it into the forwards. I think he's still doing a bit of stuff, obviously, by a distance, but our forward line's been okay in the last couple of weeks. We just hadn't got the ball down there all that often.
Well, Rob Ratton was a forwards coach at Hawthorn for a while there.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. But otherwise, controlling the forward line, you'd assume the way we've set up our leadership group, Membry is one of the Met leaders. So I'd have to guess that he's the one up there controlling, getting players the spaces, getting the setups right and that sort of thing. I'm sure he is the one who's in contact with Ruffy quite often about how we're going to attack this, how we're going to play this week. I'm assuming that we'll get him back when we go to the Gold Coast. He just doesn't travel to Adelaide. So,
I think so, yeah.
So it's basically he'll see him off on the plane and then he'll see him when he gets back. So it's not like he's not talking to him for a week or anything. So I'd assume out on the field itself, it's got to be Membry running the show up there.
Parker, I've got one for you from Joe Fogarty. He says, why does Gresh hit his 35-metre out straight in front set shots like he's trying to kick a beanbag torp 100 metres across his body?
Yeah, he certainly doesn't run in a straight line. I hope Ruff's looking at that. You'll see him. I mean, the one he missed against Adelaide, he clearly ran diagonally right and kicked the ball dead straight, exactly where he was running. And he's done that a few times. You don't mind him. I would have rather he had that shot that Loney kicked out in the full from the pocket. That would have suited Gresham. He's sort of creative enough to, step around and kick around the body. He's a very ordinary set shot. I think we can say that. He's not a bad sort of kick moving the ball forward. He's not a bad running and snapping shot at goal, but his set shots are a real worry. So, yeah, I think that the most fundamental issue in his technique, he doesn't kick it far from set shots, certainly, but he doesn't kick it straight. He runs... Well, he kicks it exactly where he runs. He doesn't run straight. So I don't know whether they get Stuart Lowe down there and say, what did you do to straighten your run up? What did you do to straighten your action? Just get someone in there and say, mate, just mark a spot, run in a straight line, and invariably you'll kick it straight.
I think Stuart's problem was he always bent his back. He straightened his back and he was good. We'll go back to Parker here. The growing calls to drop Seb Ross. Where do you think we're sitting with that?
I think we said last week he had credits in the bank, and he still does. He had another quiet game, but so did Brad Hill, for that matter. You'd argue Brad Hill has less credits in the bank at St Kilda than Seb Ross does. Obviously, Brad Hill probably has a better CV overall in his career, but yeah, both of those guys, and I guess the Hill one, he's getting 9 or 10 possessions in the first half of most games and 2 or 3 in the second. Thought Seb worked hard on the weekend. There's no issues there. He got to the right spots. He got caught a couple of times, did a few hard things. Played all right against Richmond a couple of weeks ago, so it's probably 2 or 3 quiet games in a row for him. But, yeah, I get the frustration. I certainly do, given, obviously, his position. And we spoke to him earlier in the year as a vice-captain and a leader within the group and a best and fairest winner. He's out of form, but I don't think there's too much to worry about with Seb. It's just a case of he'll eventually find his touch. I'm a little bit more concerned about Brad Hill. I think he'll click, but I can't totally grasp why he's going missing in games for extended periods of time, given how influential he'll be at other times.
Do you think the positions have possibly been switched because Gresham going in and he's sort of moved out, I think. So it's almost like they've been swapped position to position, and maybe he hasn't got the pace to do the same job that Gresh did.
Possibly, and he's probably just adjusting a little bit to life in that group. Before we wrap things up, I think Shay raised a really interesting point. We're all familiar with Shay Williams on Twitter as a Saints fan, that we know it's been a rough week in one sense. Been a bit of news around a couple of AFL players. So Lockie Hunter, one that stepped away from football for a period of time. We know he's had an interesting year of challenges personally, and there have been players that haven't gone to hubs due to family reasons that are perfectly legitimate, not necessarily problematic reasons, just reasons of recently having a child or whatever it may be. And Gary Ablett's obviously flown back home because he's got a sick child and issues within the family, which is totally understandable. But we know the looming spectre of mental health that sits around life in general, particularly the life we live now in lockdown and COVID restrictions, and that you can't see your family, you can't see your friends as much as you used to be able to, and do things, have your social outlets that you used to be able to do. And I think given the Shane Tuck news during the week, and I think a lot of us saw the footage of his debut on social media where it was Danny Frawley being interviewed, and it kind of hits home that the player that's the subject of the topic and the person talking about him have unfortunately both fallen victim to the same disease, if you want to call it that. So I think it's always important to talk about that in an awareness sense. We know that the players that play for the club that we support are facing challenges now where they've got 8, 9, 10, 11 weeks away from home, and they may never have done that before. So I guess it's just that timely reminder. And I know, Nick, you've been big in these conversations to put your hand up, and it was very sad hearing Michael Tuck say that Shane, I guess, wasn't able to acknowledge that the problem perhaps that he was facing. And yeah, I guess that's the message. I think it's close to our club's heart for obvious reasons, but that message that you just got to put your hand up and have those conversations when they're necessary.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's really hard. I think especially for males and men to kind of have those conversations. It's something that isn't intrinsically built in us to talk about our emotions and how we feel. And I think we've got to be really careful. We talk about football from a perspective of entertainment and passion. We're supporters of a club. We love watching the footy. We love supporting our team, and we want the best for our team. But quite often we forget that these guys are human beings and they've got families, and the things, potentially not the things that we individually say, although I'm sure that can make a difference. But the things that we as a group, as a collective, say about players at times can be a bit much. I think we can be very rough on these guys, and we talk about guys like Seb Ross and Bradley Hill as assets, as things that we kind of own for our footy club, and we forget that they're people with families and mums and dads. And Luke Ball spoke about it earlier, the impact things like a trade or a change of clubs or a grand final loss can have on their family. It's something that you don't think about even as a player in those circumstances, let alone as a supporter. And I think we can be better in this regard, in how we treat footballers and how we treat people in this community, in this environment, and how we treat each other as a whole. I think it's something that we can all step up and be better at. It's something that I've certainly tried to do over the last few years, becoming a parent and having a child of my own. I've been through my own mental health battles, and it's something that I continue to deal with and fight with, on a weekly, if not daily basis. And these times are tough. These times are tough for everyone. And regardless of the fact that they're playing a game, regardless of the fact that they're on decent money, these guys are human beings, and they've got feelings and emotions that they're going to have to deal with, and are often very difficult to talk about and express, especially in that type of macho, manly environment. And I think, we've got to give these guys some slack. We've got to cut them some slack and get better.
Yeah. Now, as tough as it's going to be, a footy club is probably one of the best places for them to be at this sort of time as well. You look at a local like you get your small little town out in the country and something really bad happens there. What's the first thing that gets behind the family of what's happened? It's the footy club. They come in, they look after them, they try and help everywhere, any way they possibly can. It's, as I'm saying, probably one of the best places that any player with a problem should be able to do. But go to someone and say, look, they're their mates. Let's go. All right, well, I'm struggling here. But in the way of the club ourselves, I think we've sort of, as they're saying, hit the lotto jackpot with getting where we're based. The ability to have all these extra people up there with them, their families or their kids, and just having that little hub to ourselves to make it feel like a home away from home, to try and normalize things a little bit more. Just try to get that mindset right. It's basically what they need to do at this point. Just be able to say, okay, this isn't normal. It's not going to be forever, we hope. But let's work together. Let's get through this. Support each other. Just make the absolute best out of the situation we possibly can. If someone can't do it, no one's going to go, no, you're weak, whatever. No, it's not going to happen. Players are like, I'm out, I'm sorry. And yeah, they will be 100% supportive on the clubs and fellow players. It's a really strange situation, but yeah, they'll get through it.
Yeah, and we're lucky with sport. I know sport's relatively insignificant in the scheme of things, but at the same time, it's extremely important. I mean, last time we were locked down, obviously we didn't have that, and it does provide that community feel, because the message is not just to players, but obviously to St Kilda supporters. You've obviously got that brotherhood or community spirit within your supporter group and people that you can talk to, as much as you can't see them at the football. And you know, we're lucky, obviously, at the highest level that you can play. We've all played local sport, and my local football club, for example, like most, we're not able to play this season. But that's everything. I mean, the club, you have your meals on a Thursday night with the same people that don't play for the club are down there having their feeds and talking to people and friends and family. They can't do that anymore. You have people sit at the bar having a couple of beers. They can't do that anymore. You can't sort of sit there on a Saturday and play your game and then have beers with your friends and do all that sort of stuff. That's not there anymore. So for a lot of people, that's difficult to obviously fill that void. You can't go to the pub and any of that sort of stuff. So yeah, just obviously it's a challenge that we've all got to face, and hopefully everybody can support each other the whole way through that. And yeah, important message that you raised, Shay, no doubt about that. But I guess as we sign off, we look to Port Adelaide as a real opportunity for the group. It's we've got some winnable games to come after that, but this is a big chance. Port Adelaide, very good side. It's not going to be easy, but we've just shown we can win at the Adelaide Oval. We've shown we can break hoodoos. We've obviously got to lift a little bit, but we should have only probably lost one game this year, so we should be right up and around the mark too. So this is a real challenge against one of the benchmarks in the comp, and we can set ourselves up very, very nicely if we can find a way to win this game. So Saturday night, and then it's pretty much footy every day after that. So good luck for this week, wherever we may be watching it, and let's break a second South Australian hoodoo in the same week.